Welcome back, wine lovers, consumers of the divine juice, aficionados of the nectar of the gods. I'm Jeff Davis, and today I'll take you back in time, not with a person's history, but with old vines and the grapes of which that are still harvested by a man who has been called the Vine Whisperer, Greg Lafollette.
All of these old vineyards basically came to me. I didn't approach them, so I'm holding in my hand wine from the world's oldest Cinsault vineyard.
Well, when you name your winery after your wives, it allows you to make it happen.
A little more invested that way.
Yeah, exactly.
He's Kevin Lee, Greg Lafollette's partner with Marchelle Wines. He may provide some inspiration for those of you wondering how you may be able to get into the wine industry without winemaking or viticulture knowledge or experience. He's coming up later in this episode. It's very likely you've heard Greg Lafollette in the past on my podcast. While a master of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, Greg has owned previous brands such as his namesake, Lafollette, Tandem, Alchemista Cellars, and now GLF, which you can find on the MarchelleWines.com website. Along the way, he has prudently crafted wine from historic vines. You might be able to detect the age of those vines with the aroma of the mature aromatic compounds and taste the thermal and tactile sensations on your palate. Have you heard studies at Yale suggest the flavor of wine engages more of our brain than any other human behavior? And that is certainly true when you taste wine from old vines. On the Wine Road podcast is brought to you locally by Sonoma Clean Power. For those of you in the area, learn how your actions can make a greater impact with clean, renewable energy at poweringeverydaymoments.org. That's poweringeverydaymoments.org. Before I hooked up with Greg and Kevin Lee to record this episode, I saw Greg at the National Pinot Forum. So we decided to get together, talk about Marchelle, as well as the distinct neighborhoods of the Russian River Valley. I had the extreme pleasure to attend this year's Russian River Valley Pinot Forum, which featured a panel of the top winemakers in Russian River Valley. And you, of course, were a part of that group?
Yes, I was the last speaker, and if you would have thrown a hand grenade into that crowd, you would have wiped out most of the high-echelon Pinot producers in the area.
A major topic of the Pinot Forum, which all of you winemakers commented on at some point, was the neighborhoods of the Russian River Valley. There are 6 neighborhoods within the AVA, and the soil of each provide distinctly different characteristics within Pinot Noir that is grown there. The soils are more diverse in those 6 neighborhoods than can be found in the entire country of France.
Yes, Sonoma County in general has more soil types than all of France. So
it's mind-blowing.
Yes, but it also shows the diversity of Sonoma County and the diversity of the Russian River Valley. You have everything from the foothills of the Mayakama all the way out to coastal influences with the Sebastopol Hills. And I've made wine from every single one of those neighborhoods over the years.
Do you want to give us the list of the neighborhoods?
Well, let's see if I can remember them. From west to east, there's Sebastopol Hills, Green Valley, there's the West End, the Santa Rosa floodplains, Laguna Hills, and the Eastern Hills. And that's the warmest part of the Russian River neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. It also has the most diversity of soils and has a lot of other things planted to it like Cabernet, which you could not ripen in places like the Sebastopol Hills or Green Valley.
Right. Russian River Valley is such a special place. So, any Pinot Noir you taste that's from different places, they're going to be distinctively different.
Well, you may not be able to completely taste the differences, but there are some similarities in each Russian River neighborhood that may not be seen in others. The big difference is really when you look at an atomic level and a mineral level at the different neighborhoods, they are completely distinct. And in fact, Dr. Roger Bolton, who did the original study looking at the different basic structures of these wines, said that in all of his career he'd never seen differences like this. They were all outliers from each other. And that's kind of like a birth certificate. It's a thumbprint that is only unique to that one area. And, of course, winemakers and vintages can really change things.
Sure.
And if you use a lot of new oak and pick really ripe, you're not going to see as many differences. But your birth certificate's still there. So,
right. And surely there's some other places in the world where they might have such diverse soils.
Well, the greatest example, of course, is Burgundy, with all of its different communes and its own appellative approach to things that's been worked out over centuries. Sure. But you can also look at places like New Zealand and Australia. The difference is the only place that's verified that there are these differences so far is in the Russian River Valley. It is the first. And Oregon is right now trying to do the same thing and looking at the different appellations or the different sub-appellations based on the fingerprint.
If you'd like to see a short video from those who make wine from the Russian River Valley, you can go to russianrivervalley.org, and under the menu, you'll see Discover the Neighborhoods. Now on to today's other topic, Marchelle wines and old vines. For those of you who like to get nerdy about old grape varieties, you'll find what Greg is sourcing for Marchelle is really interesting, and I'll bet you haven't heard of at least a few of these. He explains how Marchelle came to be.
I was starting to have all of these ancient vines come to me, 120 years or older. And my business partner, Kevin Lee, who is helping us out with Alchemista, Kevin knew how important my wife was to me as his was to him, so he came up with the brand Marchelle, which is my wife Mara and his wife Michelle's names, and it's dedicated to family. I'm looking at the label right now that his 13-year-old daughter designed.
Oh, she did?
It's beautiful. It's an ancient vine, and all of these old vineyards basically came to me. I didn't approach them, so I've got, I'm holding in my hand wine from the world's oldest Cinsault vineyard. It's the Bechtold vineyard in McColmy River.
And let's emphasize that again. It's the world's oldest Cinsault vineyard, a French variety, here in Northern California.
Yes, that's right. And I have one of the oldest Zinfandel vineyards, was planted in 1888 or 1889, also in the McColmy River AVA, 121-year-old Carignan Colombard, whose oldest vines from the Betty Ann Vineyard are 120 years old, and also some from the West Cameron. That's a youngster at about 70 years old.
Yeah.
The Carignan will have anywhere between 8 and 20% of an almost extinct white varietal called Montbedon, also known as Burger. And it took me a couple of years to actually figure out what variety it actually was. And Lucy Morton, who's probably one of the world's greatest ampelographers, figure-outer of grapevines, helped me to figure that out.
And along with that burger, the blend also contains a small amount of Alicante Boucher and Flame Tokay. And your Zinfandel also has some interesting old vine varieties.
In the Zinfandel, there's a measurable percentage of Mission. Flame Tokay, as we talked about, which was in the late 1800s, was the most important table grape in California.
It's a beautiful grape. It's colorful. It's pink with like tiger stripes.
Yeah, Jeff, you came out and helped me pick one time out there.
I did. Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah.
I loved it.
And a little bit of Malvasia Bianco, which is a white grape from Tuscany that's now becoming close to being extinct there because it's being replanted by more valuable reds, or so they think.
That's the way it goes, yeah.
And Black Prince, which is, I'm an ampelographer, and I'd never heard of that. And it's very, very rare, was an important table grape in the 1500s.
Yeah, that's another rare grape. It's really dark, as the name implies.
And big berries. And you may have seen this before because in the Dutch Master still lifes, with the dead bunny and the big bowl of fruit, those big bulbous black grapes are probably Black Prince.
I'll post some photos of the Black Prince and Flame Tokay on my website, along with this interview at onthewineroad.us. Are you intrigued by these grape varieties? Marchelle wines are available at a couple of stores in Sonoma County, but mostly direct to consumer, meaning if you'd like to consume these old vine wines, you can reach out directly to them and they'd be happy to ship them to you. Find the wines and details at marchellewines.com. MARCHELLE wines.com. As I mentioned earlier, you'll also find Greg's Chardonnay and Pinot Noir under the GLF brand, and there's still a little bit of his port-style wine available as well. Sinful. That's the name, and it's sinfully good, too. I'll pause now for a word from my sponsor, then continue my adventure on the wine road.
Our lives are built on moments, the big wins, the laughs, the long drives home. As your public power provider, we at Sonoma Clean Power thrive on sustaining everyday moments, and we do so with a clean energy future in mind. We know these moments are cherished forever. Together, we can protect today's moments and those yet to come. Learn how your actions can make an even greater impact at poweringeverydaymoments.org.
We're back. Thanks for joining me for the second part of today's episode. If you've ever wondered how you might be able to slide into a position in the wine industry, Greg Lafollette's partner Kevin Lee was able to make that happen. Here's his story, which may inspire you to pursue a way in.
Yeah, about a couple years ago, Greg and I got together before the pandemic and started Marchelle. And our first wine was this old vine Colombard from Russian River Valley that was originally created for single thread as their house white. But because of the pandemic, restaurants closed down, and we decided to leverage that wine that we already created as our first wine for our brand, Marchelle, which is, named after our wives, Mara and Marchelle, to create Marchelle.
Was that a political choice or just...
Well, when you name your winery after your wives, it allows you to make it happen.
A little more invested that way.
Yeah, exactly.
So you guys are now working with, Greg has always worked with older vineyards, and you're continuing that and you're bringing it to the forefront. And you were just telling me you think the Gen Zs and the millennials are interested in old vines.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what Gen Z and young millennials are interested from a wine perspective is that they want to understand where wine comes from, and they want to understand that the grapes that are going into your wines are made from sustainable and organic practices, and it's like natural. They want to know if there's chemicals that are being put into the wine in part of the creation process. And so, we try to, that's one of the things that we're focusing on with old vines is that most, 100-year-old vineyards are dry farmed, so there's no irrigation, and they're organic because, old vines that are 50 to 100 years old already know what they're doing.
Right. Almost some of them have always been organic.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that creates some nuance in the winemaking process in terms of sourcing grapes from 100-year-old vines makes interesting and unique wines as part of that process, and leveraging obviously Greg's winemaking expertise.
Yeah, you hooked up your wagon to a pretty good horse there.
Yeah, definitely lucky to become friends with Greg about 15 years ago.
Is that because you were a fan of his wine?
I was. So how my wife and I met Greg was through a tandem winemaking dinner. One weekend, they used to have like a Sonoma Wine Country weekend. Mm-hmm. We got invited to a tandem winemaking dinner. Yeah. And that's how I met Greg. And
stayed in touch?
Well, Greg was so knowledgeable during the dinner and also so humble. And I think that's what set him apart, is that he was so invested in everyone at the table having conversation and creating a great experience as part of the dinner. But not only that, but his wines were amazing. Since then, we've just kind of kept in touch over the years, and he's invited me up to help in the cellar through harvest, and that's how we became great friends.
Yeah, no wonder. I should point out Tandem was one of the brands he was working with for a while.
Yeah.
You were a tech guy from San Francisco, and but obviously a aficionado of wine, good wine.
Yeah, I've always been really interested in Pinot Noir, particularly. That was kind of like my go-to wine, and that's where the connection with Tandem really started. Yeah. And I just loved Greg's wine, and then the fact that he was such a nice guy and so willing to educate, and so humble in terms of, just allowing people to be, no ego,
right? Yeah.
For sure, and that's our connection. And
well, that's exactly why I've been hanging around, the same reasons.
Yeah, and through that process, and then when the pandemic happened, and his partner at that time decided to kind of just retire and get out of the winemaking business, and I'm like, Greg, we need to continue your legacy, and so let's do something together, and that's how Marchelle started, is to maintain Greg's legacy of great winemaking.
And you're a marketing professional, so that's something he could definitely depend on now and then rely on.
I'm definitely hoping that together with Marchelle and leveraging his knowledge and experience and expertise in winemaking, in making great wines, and leveraging my own experience in marketing, the Marchelle brand will be successful.
It's interesting, these older vines, and there's such a story there. These things have a story of their own, these vines that have been around over 100 years, and I find it very fascinating, especially when you start talking about great varieties like Flame Tokay and Black Prince that you don't hear about anymore.
Yeah, and that's what makes this business so interesting is, being able to, take some really unique and interesting grape varietals that most people have never heard of, like, Cinsault and Carignan and Colombard, and leveraging Greg's winemaking expertise to, showcase these types of old vines and unique varietals to really the general public, and how great these grapes can make wine from. And, just from my experience, I love the wines that we create. They're delicious and they're very food friendly.
Right, yeah. Well, congratulations for getting on board, and I wish you great success in helping Greg out and moving forward in the future with these older vines.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And definitely, like, one of my own kind of missions is to help Greg and Marchelle create success and maintain Greg's legacy in winemaking.
I look forward to meeting Michelle sometime soon.
Thanks.
Kevin Lee. I'll say one thing, he sure has boosted Marchelle Wine's social media presence. Check out those old vine wines at marchellewines.com. See what you think of their unique characteristics. For more interviews and wine trivia, visit my website, onthewineroad.us. Find me on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram as JD Wine Road. Please subscribe to my podcast so each new episode automatically downloads for your listening pleasure. On the Wine Road podcast is recorded, written, and produced by me, and the podcast themes are composed by Marscott. I'll catch you next time. I'm Jeff Davis.